Marissa hadn't meant to answer the phone. She wasn't supposed to be at the front desk that morning. She was a housekeeper, not a receptionist. But when she passed by the empty counter and heard the line ringing for the third time, something inside her hesitated. She looked around the quiet lobby of the Halberton Grand, polished marble floors, velvet armchairs, the faint scent of citrus and wood polish, and picked up the receiver. "Halberton Grand, good morning," she said. In her gentle, slightly accented English, there was a pause. Then a male voice on the other end, deep and calm. "I need someone to send up fresh towels to suite 1105. She nodded instinctively, grabbing a pen. "Of course, sir." The man added something else. Just a phrase, a question, in Dutch. Not. Many people would have noticed. Not many Americans anyway. But Marissa had been born in Utrecht. Her Dutch was buried deep beneath years of living quietly in the US, but it was still there, like the muscle memory of childhood. So, without thinking, she replied in fluent, natural Dutch. And the line went silent. Then, the man's voice again, this time sharper, alert. "You speak Dutch?" If this moment already has you curious, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. These stories are here to move, surprise, and stay with you. And if you were in Marissa's shoes, what would you have done? Let us know in the comments. Marissa felt her heart spike. She stood straighter, still holding the phone. "Yes," she said cautiously. "It's my first language." Another long pause, then a slow, curious, "Thank you." He hung up, and just like that the moment passed, and almost forgettable. Almost. But within 20 minutes, a man she'd never seen before, tall, dressed in black, wearing a discreet earpiece, appeared in the housekeeping wing with a clipboard. "R.A.E. You Marissa Voss?" She blinked. "Yes." He handed her a sealed envelope. Inside was a note. "I'd like to speak with you. Suite 1105. Noon. No name, no signature. Just that." Marissa stared at it, heart thudding. She looked up to ask the man a question, but he was already gone, walking away without a word, like he hadn't been there at all. Suite 1105 was on the top floor, the penthouse, the only one with a private elevator and a keycard lock she'd never used before. Most employees at the Halberton Grand never even saw the inside of it. Only senior managers or hand-picked staff were granted access. It was the type of place you only heard rumors about. Imported marble, a piano that played itself, a bathtub big enough to swim in. She almost didn't go. She had every reason not to. Housekeepers weren't supposed to fraternize with guests, especially not with guests in penthouse suites who left handwritten notes like something out of a spy movie. But curiosity, or maybe fate, tugged at her like it had when she answered the phone. And the truth was, Marissa hadn't had a conversation in Dutch in over a decade. Hearing those words again, feeling them in her mouth, had opened something she didn't expect. A door to a part of herself she had sealed off long ago. At 12:01 she knocked. The door opened almost immediately. The man who stood there was older, mid-50s maybe, with silver in his beard and the posture of someone who had learned to command. Rooms without trying. He wore no suit, no badge of wealth, just a black turtleneck and dark jeans. His presence was calm but not soft. There was precision in his eyes. "You came," he said simply. She nodded. "You asked." He gestured for her to enter. The suite was unlike anything she'd ever seen. A wall of windows looked over the river, soft jazz played in the background, and there were fresh white orchids on the table. It smelled like cedar wood and something richer. The scent of money, perhaps. But it wasn't ostentatious. Everything was quiet, intentional. Understated wealth, not loud extravagance. Marissa stood just inside the threshold, unsure of whether to remove her shoes, to apologize, to run. "I'm sorry," she said after a moment. "I shouldn't be here. This is probably against the rules." The man smiled, faintly. "And yet you're here." She swallowed. "Who are you?" "Name's Victor de Waal," he said, walking toward the minibar. "I own this hotel." Marissa froze. She had heard the name, in whispered hallway rumors, in the local paper's financial section, a Dutch-born tech investor, billionaire, reclusive. sometimes stayed at his own properties under different names. She had assumed he was a myth, but here he was pouring himself a glass of sparkling water like he had all the time in the world. "And you speak Dutch," he said, glancing back at her. "I do." He looked at her closely. "Why are you here, Marissa?" She frowned. "You asked me to come." "No," he said. "Why are you here? In this hotel, in this country, cleaning rooms, folding sheets." The question hit deeper than it should have. "I needed to work," she replied. "To stay, to survive. And that's all?" She hesitated. "There's a past and a daughter, and some choices I had to make." He said nothing, just nodded slowly as if confirming something to himself. There was a long pause. "I want to offer you something," he said finally. Marissa blinked. I'm not looking for charity." "It's not charity," he said. "It's a job. A very different one." She didn't move. Her heartbeat was in her ears. He walked to the table and picked up a leather folder. Inside was a contract, simple, clean, no legal traps. Her name was already typed at the top. "I'm opening a foundation," he said. "One that supports immigrant women. But I need someone who understands both sides of the story. Someone who's lived it, someone I can trust." She stared at the paper. "And you trust me?" she asked, voice low. "I trust your first instinct. You answered the phone, you spoke honestly, you showed up." Marissa felt the weight of the years behind her pressing against the air in that room. The years she had hidden, worked in silence, avoided questions. The dream she buried the day she stepped off that plane alone 5 years ago, with a suitcase and a toddler in her arms. She looked at the contract again, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine that maybe, just maybe, her story wasn't over yet. Marissa didn't sleep that night. The contract lay untouched on her kitchen table, still crisp, still impossible. Its presence in the tiny apartment made everything else feel unreal. She had walked home with it in her bag like it was made of glass, afraid it would break or vanish if she looked at it too closely. The apartment smelled faintly of lavender and fried rice from the neighbors, thin walls, cheap carpets, a cracked tile near the sink that she had covered with a mat. It was small, just a one-bedroom, but she had made it feel warm, safe. Her daughter was already asleep when she got home, curled up in the bed they shared, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Leah was 5 now, but still held onto that toy like it was part of her soul. Marissa sat on the floor beside the bed and just watched her breathe. She had come here for Leah, left everything, her language, her family, her reputation, so her daughter could grow up somewhere better, somewhere freer. The journey had cost more than money. It had cost sleep, self-worth, years of her life spent in silence. She brushed a strand of hair from Leah's forehead. "You don't even know," she whispered. "You don't even know how much I've given up just so you never have to." She closed her eyes and remembered the airport, 4 years earlier. JFK, cold wind, harsh lights. Leah in her arms, barely a year old. No one met them. No one helped. She had $200 in her coat pocket and a handwritten address of a woman she barely knew. A friend of a friend from back home who rented out rooms to immigrants for cash. Marissa remembered walking through the terminal, afraid someone would stop her, afraid her voice would betray her, afraid most of all that she had made a mistake she couldn't undo. But when she stepped outside and looked up at the city skyline, the fear gave way to something else. Determination. She had made a promise that day, to her daughter, to herself, that no matter what it cost she would build something from nothing, and she had. It wasn't big, it wasn't easy, but it was hers. Now the contract on the table threatened all of that, because accepting it would mean letting go of the survival version of herself. The one who scrubbed floors, stayed quiet, kept her head down. The one who was invisible on purpose. And yet, what if that part of her had already died the moment she answered that phone? She got up quietly, made herself tea, and sat in the only chair in the apartment that didn't wobble. The contract stared at her. Her name was printed at the top in bold, Marissa Voss. She traced it with her finger like it belonged to someone else. Someone who wore clean blazers and spoke in meetings. Someone who didn't carry gloves and rags in her bag. Someone who wasn't invisible. What if this was a trick? What if it was a test, a setup? What if she signed it and it all disappeared, and she lost the one job she had now? The thought alone made her chest tighten. No, she couldn't afford that. She stood up, shoved the folder back into her bag, and decided to go to work early, get her mind off it, go back to what she knew. But the world had changed, because once a ducker opens, and even just a little, it's impossible to unsee the light behind it. At the Halberton Grand, the day moved slowly. She vacuumed, she scrubbed, she flipped sheets with mechanical precision. But her mind stayed locked on that suite, on that conversation, on that sentence, someone I can trust. In the staff break room, Linda, a chatty woman from Brooklyn who had been in housekeeping for nearly 2 decades, noticed something. "You look like you saw a ghost," she said, munching on a granola bar. Marissa tried to smile. "Just didn't sleep much." Linda raised an eyebrow. "Don't tell me it's the guy in 1105. Marissa stiffened. "What about him?" "He's been staying here a few days, private guy. But I heard from Trina at front desk he's the owner. The real deal. Has a whole floor named after his company in the city." Marissa stayed quiet. Linda leaned in. "Did he talk to you?" Marissa hesitated. "Kind of." Linda's eyes lit up. "Kind of? Girl, what does kind of mean?" Marissa shook her head, trying to laugh it off. "It's nothing, just towels." But Linda kept staring at her with a knowing look. "Towels don't make people look like that." That night, after putting Leah to bed, Marissa took out the contract again. This time she read every word. No tricks, no traps, just trust. Salary more than triple what she made. A flexible schedule. Training included. Position: Program Coordinator for a soon-to-be-launched foundation aimed at helping immigrant women in urban environments transition into stable jobs. It didn't just offer work, it offered purpose. There was a handwritten note tucked inside the folder that she hadn't noticed before. "I know what it feels like to be far from where you started. I know what it means to rebuild with your hands while hiding your history. This is not a gift, it's recognition. If you're ready, the door is open." Marissa pressed the note to her chest. The next morning she walked Leah to preschool. They held hands and Leah skipped along the sidewalk, singing softly in Dutch, a nursery rhyme Marissa had almost forgotten. She didn't even remember teaching it to her, but the words must have stuck. When they reached the gate, Leah looked up at her. "Mama?" "Yes. Are we going to stay here forever?" Marissa blinked. "What do you mean?" "I like my friends. I don't want to move." Again. Marissa crouched down to her level and held her shoulders gently. "We're not going anywhere." "Promise?" She hesitated, then nodded. "I promise." But even as she said it, she realized maybe that was the real reason she was scared. To say yes because saying yes meant staying. It meant letting go of the fear that this life was temporary. It meant admitting she could build something here. And that was the scariest thing of all. She went back to work. Finished her shift, stayed. Late cleaning rooms no one had asked her to. The familiar ache returned to her lower back, the soreness in her hands. The weight of invisible labor. She thought of Victor, of the way he looked at her without pity, of the contract with her name on it, of the words, "This is not a gift, it's recognition." That night, after Leah fell asleep, she picked up a pen. She signed it. She didn't think, she didn't dream, she just decided. Marissa stared at the envelope in her hands longer than she needed to. The name Victor Deval was typed neatly in the top left corner. Like the return address on an invitation, she wasn't sure she'd be welcome at. She had walked past the front desk twice, pacing like someone looking for something they'd dropped. Linda had noticed. "You gonna mail that thing or marry it?" she asked, eyebrows raised over her coffee cup. Marissa smiled weakly. "Something like that." "You okay?" "Just new shoes." Linda didn't press. She rarely did. That was one of the things Marissa appreciated most about her. Kindness with space. By the third pass, she dropped the envelope into the outgoing box without looking back. It was done. The next morning, she found a note slipped under her apartment door. The paper was heavy stock, cream-colored, no logo. "Your presence is confirmed. Driver will arrive at 8:15. No uniform required." Marissa reread the last line at least 5 times. No uniform required. 3 words that made her stomach tighten, because for the last 4 years the uniform had been more than workwear. It had been armor. A way to belong without being seen. A way to survive without being questioned. She folded linens, she cleaned rooms, she stayed out of the way. She knew the codes, the rhythms, the invisible choreography of service. But stepping out of that role meant stepping into herself, and that terrified her. She spent an hour staring at her closet. Nothing in it felt right. Her old clothes, jeans, polos, discount sweaters, all felt too casual. She had one blouse she'd worn to Leah's preschool, orientation, and even that had a missing button. She pinned it shut with a brooch and hoped no one would notice. At 8:15 sharp, a Blacktown car pulled up in front of the building. The driver, a soft-spoken woman named Iris, opened the back door and greeted her in Dutch. Goedemorgen, mevrouw, Vos. Marissa blinked. You speak? Iris smiled. Not much, just enough to say hello. Mr. de Waal said it would make you feel welcome. Marissa's throat tightened unexpectedly. The drive took less than 15 minutes. They passed through a quiet industrial district and eventually arrived at a glass-fronted building with a minimalist silver sign, De Waal Foundation. She stepped out, heels clicking nervously on the sidewalk, and entered the building. The lobby was silent, modern, elegant, white marble floors, clean lines, a wall of greenery behind the reception desk. Everything smelled faintly of eucalyptus. A young man in a slate-grey sweater approached her with a kind smile. Ms. Vos? Yes. Welcome. Mr. de Waal is expecting you. She followed him to a private elevator, heart pounding harder with every floor it climbed. By the time the doors opened, her palms were sweating. The top floor was open plan with glass walls and soft wood finishes. Natural light spilled across long tables and quiet offices. It didn't feel like a place that ran with chaos. It felt like a place that chose calm. Victor stood by the window, phone to his ear, back turned. Marissa didn't want to interrupt, but he turned the moment he sensed her presence. You came, he said, lowering the phone. I signed. His eyes crinkled slightly. I saw. They sat. No small talk, just space. You're not used to being in rooms like this, are you? He asked. She shook her head. No. That's okay. You're not here to be someone else. You're here to be you. Marissa didn't know how to respond to that. Instead, she asked, Why me? Victor looked at her for a long moment. Because you don't speak to impress. You speak when it matters. That's rare. The onboarding began quickly. An office was assigned to her, small but bright. Her name was already printed on the door. Vos. A woman named Rhea, tall and efficient, walked her through documents, orientation packets, and a basic training schedule. Your first real task, she said, is to review some of our candidate stories for the foundation launch. Marissa opened the first file. It was a woman named Solange, originally from the Ivory Coast, former nanny, domestic abuse survivor, applying for legal assistance through the foundation. Marissa stopped reading halfway through. Her hands trembled, because, as much as she wanted to help, she couldn't help but see herself on every page. Different names, different countries. Same silence, same fear, same hope. By the end of the day, her head was spinning. She stepped into the restroom, locked the door, and sat on the closed toilet seat. Not to cry, just to breathe. She took off her heels and rubbed her feet, already blistered. Her blouse clung to her skin. The pinned brooch had come loose. She looked in the mirror. The woman looking back at her didn't feel like her. Not yet. That evening she picked up Leah from preschool. Mama, you look like a teacher. Leah giggled. Marissa smiled. Do I? Or, maybe a boss, she laughed. Maybe. But as they walked home, Marissa caught their reflection in a shop window. Leah swinging her arm, bright and bouncy. Marissa, tired, overwhelmed, uncertain. She didn't feel like a boss. She felt like a housekeeper in borrowed skin. That night, she tucked Leah in and sat back down at the kitchen table. No contract this time, just silence. She poured herself tea and stared at the wall for a long time. It would be easy to quit, to say it was too much, to go back to what was safe, to step out of the light. But then she remembered Victor's words. "You're not here to be someone else. You're here to be you." And for the first time in her life, she wondered, what would it mean to truly be herself out loud? The next morning, Marissa left the apartment before sunrise. Leah was still asleep, her small form tangled in blankets, one arm stretched across the pillow like she owned the whole world. Marissa kissed her gently on the forehead, whispered a soft, "I'll see you soon," and closed the door quietly behind her. The sky outside was bruised with the first hint of light. The streets were still half asleep, delivery trucks rumbling, storefronts still dark, people moving like ghosts on. Routine. She used to walk these streets in a uniform. Always at dawn, always anonymous. Now, in slacks and a pressed blouse borrowed from a friend, she felt exposed, like someone playing dress-up in a story that didn't belong to her. The Foundation's office was quiet when she arrived. Rhea greeted her with a short nod. "Conference room, 9 sharp." Marissa followed the hallway, heart pounding. The glass walls made everything feel transparent. Too much so. She felt like every step echoed. Inside the room were 7 people, staff members, board advisors, and one man she didn't recognize. His suit was perfect, his smile not so much. Victor arrived a moment later. "Morning, everyone. This is Marissa Voss. She'll be helping coordinate our community outreach for the new program launch." There was a pause. One of those strange silences where words aren't needed to feel judgment. The man in the suit, early 40s, polished, confident, extended his hand. "Daniel Archer, Development Director." She shook it. Firm grip. Cold fingers. "Glad to meet you," she said. He looked at her for a beat too long. "You're the one from housekeeping, right?" Her throat tightened. "Yes." "Interesting hire," he said, then turned back to his tablet. No one spoke. The meeting was filled with acronyms she didn't understand, charts that blurred together, and conversations that moved too fast. Marissa tried to keep up, taking notes, even when she didn't know what she was writing. When it ended, everyone stood quickly and drifted toward the exit. She stayed behind. Victor approached her. "You did fine," he said softly. "I didn't understand half of it." "You weren't expected to? Then why was I there? To see what the room feels like. Next time you'll speak." She looked at him. "They don't want me there." He paused. "That's not your problem." Later that day, Rhea handed her a file, "Your first solo task." Marissa opened it. It was about a woman named Farah, a recent applicant from Syria. Her visa was about to expire. She had no job, no formal education, 2 kids, and was facing eviction. "She's asking for assistance from the housing fund," Rhea said. "The board wants a review." Marissa read through the notes. Sparse, but enough. A social worker had recommended her. A neighbor had vouched for her character. She looked up. "What am I supposed to do?" "Meet her, hear her story, decide if she qualifies." Marissa blinked. "Me?" "You," Rhea confirmed. "You're the voice of the program now." The meeting was scheduled in a small cafe downtown. Marissa arrived early, nerves raw. When Farah entered, Marissa recognized the fear immediately. It was the same look she used to wear. They sat. Ordered tea, talked, at first slowly, then more freely. Farah spoke with a thick accent, but her words were clear. She had worked in a kitchen, then cleaned houses, then nothing. Her youngest son had asthma. Her landlord was threatening to change the locks. "I don't want money," Farah said at the end. "I want time, a chance." Marissa nodded. She believed her. Because she was her that night, she stayed late at the office. Everyone else had gone home. She typed her report, slowly, carefully, making sure every sentence honored the truth of what she heard. She ended it with, "Farah does not just deserve support. She represents exactly who this foundation was created for." She signed it. M. Voss. As she saved the file, she looked at the reflection of herself in the monitor. Same face. New story. Maybe. The next morning, Daniel Archer cornered her in the hallway. "I read your report," he said, arms crossed. She braced. Herself. "You wrote it like someone who's never worked in policy." "I haven't," she said. "That's obvious." Marissa held his gaze. "But I've lived the life we're trying to help." He didn't reply, just walked away. At lunch, she sat alone until Victor slid into the chair across from her. "Let him talk," he said. "He doesn't think I belong here. Doesn't matter what he thinks. It matters if he convinces." The board. Victor looked her in the eyes. "You weren't hired because you knew the system. You were hired because you are the reason the system has to change." That night, she walked Leah home in the rain. They shared an umbrella. Leah jumped over puddles. Marissa felt exhausted, drained but different, like she'd survived a battle no one else could see. As they climbed the stairs, Leah looked up at her. "Mama, do you like your new job?" Marissa paused, then nodded. "I think I do," because for the first time in her life, as she wasn't invisible, she was becoming someone new. The invitation came on a Thursday afternoon, a simple email. No design, no formatting, just a subject line that read Community Night. Keynote confirmation. M. Vos Marissa blinked. She read the message again, then a third time. There was no mistake. The foundation was planning a public event to raise awareness and introduce its first initiative to the community. Marissa had been asked to speak, not as staff, not as a caseworker, but as someone who had lived what the foundation stood for. A face. A voice. The voice. She stared at the screen, hands frozen. Her instinct was to reply, no, immediately, politely, firmly. She had never spoken publicly before, never held a microphone, never shared her story beyond whispers, and even then, only in pieces. Besides, people like her didn't speak in rooms like that. They cleaned them, set them up, faded into the walls while others took the spotlight, and yet, the invite wasn't a suggestion, it was a confirmation. Someone, likely Victor, had already said yes on her behalf. That night, she walked Leah home in silence. Her daughter skipped ahead, swinging her arms, humming to herself. Marissa tried to keep her breathing steady. She felt like she had been pushed onto a stage with no script. Back in the apartment, after dinner, after bedtime, she opened her closet and stared at the clothes inside. Nothing looked like something a keynote speaker would wear. Nothing said, leader. Nothing said ready. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from Victor. You don't have to tell everything. Just tell the truth. She didn't reply. She didn't know if she could, because the truth wasn't neat. It wasn't inspirational. It was raw, messy, and still hurt. She stayed up late writing, deleted everything, then started again, then deleted that too. What was she even trying to say? That she had come here alone, that she'd worked jobs where her name wasn't even used, that she had once slept on a floor next to her daughter because rent was more important than furniture. Was that the story? Or was it the one about the silence? The years she stopped speaking Dutch, even to herself because it hurt too much to remember who she used to be? The next morning she asked Ria if she could decline the invitation. Ria looked up from her computer. You can, she said, but I wouldn't. Marissa felt her chest tighten. I'm not a speaker. You're not a lot of things. Until you are. That night, while Leah was brushing her teeth, she found an old photo tucked inside one of her books, one she hadn't seen in years. It was from Utrecht, a younger version of herself standing near a canal, smiling, not posed, not polished, just real. She was wearing a scarf her sister had knit, holding a paper bag full of pastries, and looking like someone who belonged somewhere. She traced the edge of the photo with her thumb. That girl had dreams. That girl believed in beginnings. She hadn't seen her in a long time. Maybe it was time to bring her back. The night of the event arrived too quickly. She wore the only blazer she owned, borrowed again from Linda, and stood in front of the mirror for what felt like hours. Leah sat on the bed behind her, kicking her feet. You look like a queen, she said, grinning. Marissa laughed nervously. A very nervous queen. Leah nodded solemnly. Queens are nervous too, but they still show up. The community hall was already filling when she arrived. Rows of chairs, soft lighting, a projector screen displaying the foundation's name. In delicate letters. People mingled. Staff, volunteers, donors, neighbors. It was the first time Marissa saw how many lives this place had already touched. Ria handed her a printed program. Her name was there. Final speaker. She felt her knees wobble. You okay? Ria asked. Marissa nodded. No. Ria smiled. Good. That means it matters. When her name was called, she walked onto the stage with hands colder than ice. The microphone buzzed faintly. As she adjusted it, the crowd fell silent. She looked out and saw faces, real people, expecting something, anything. She took a breath and began. 4 years ago, I arrived in this country with a suitcase, a baby, and a language I had learned but never trusted. I didn't know anyone, I didn't have a plan. What I had was fear, and a promise I made to my daughter that somehow I would make this place home. She paused. The room stayed still. I cleaned rooms. I made beds. I worked long shifts where no one said my name. I hid. Because that felt safer than being seen. Her voice caught. She looked at the back row and saw Victor, arms crossed, face still. She looked down, then up again. But then someone spoke to me in the language I had buried. And something opened. Not just a door. A memory. A reminder that I still had a voice and that it mattered. She closed the speech with a story about Farah, about listening, about why the foundation wasn't charity, but recognition. When she stepped away from the mic, the room was silent. Then, applause, not loud, not explosive, but honest. She returned to her seat, hands shaking. She didn't remember most of what she said. Just the feeling, like something inside her had cracked open and poured out into the world. That night, she sat at the kitchen table, tea in hand, feet sore, heart full. Leah was asleep. The speech papers were still in her purse. She didn't want to reread them. She just wanted to sit with the silence because this time, it didn't feel empty. It felt like space, room to grow, room to speak. By Monday morning, the speech had been shared over 8,000 times. A staff member had clipped a short video of Marissa's final lines, the part where she talked about being seen, about having a voice. Someone had added subtitles, another overlaid soft piano music. Then it found its way onto social media. Marissa hadn't even watched it. She didn't want to see herself on camera, her voice cracking, her hands nervously gripping the podium. But the world had seen it, and the world had started asking questions. When she arrived at the foundation office, Ria met her with an unexpected expression. "You broke our inbox," she said, handing Marissa a stack of printed emails. Marissa blinked. "What is all this? Invitations, thank you notes, press requests. One from a university in Boston asking if you'd speak at their diversity conference, 2 nonprofits asking for your story, and this one." She handed Marissa a sealed envelope with a red wax stamp. Marissa frowned. "What is it?" Ria smiled. "From the Netherlands." Marissa waited until she was alone in her office to open it. The letter was handwritten, in neat formal Dutch. "Ms. Vos, your recent speech has reached members of our Immigrant Integration Department in The Hague. We are launching a new program to support women returning from displacement. Your experience and your voice could offer invaluable perspective. We would be honored if you would consider attending as a guest speaker at our pilot summit next month in Amsterdam. Travel, accommodations, and honorarium included. We await your reply. Dr. Lennart Smit, Ministerie van Sociale Zaken en Werkgelegenheid." She read it 3 times, then sat perfectly still. Amsterdam, the very city she had sworn never to see again. She had passed through it once, before leaving. The flight had taken off from Schiphol. She remembered sitting in the airport with Leah asleep in her arms and staring out the window, unsure if she would ever come back. Unsure if she even wanted to. Now they were inviting her, not as an immigrant, not as a statistic, but as a speaker, as a name. She didn't respond right away. She couldn't. Instead, she buried herself in work. More applicants had come in, stories from El Salvador, from Cambodia, from Ukraine. Women who, like her, were rebuilding their lives piece by piece, one quiet act of courage at a time. She took their calls, read their files, advocated when no one else would, and still, the letter stayed in her desk drawer, unopened but unforgettable. Week later, Victor called her into his office. He pointed at the envelope. "They followed up." "I know. Do you want to go? Marissa hesitated. I'm not sure. Why? She looked out the window. The city below buzzed with life. Taxis, people, dogs, street musicians. It all moved without her. I left that place for a reason, she said. You left because you had to, he replied. Now you get to choose. That night, she pulled a suitcase from the back of the closet. Leah noticed immediately. Are we going somewhere? Marissa shook her head. Just me, for a few days. Leah's face fell. Why? I was invited to speak. In a place where Mama used to live. Leah's eyes widened. Where I was born. Marissa nodded slowly. Leah climbed into her lap. Will you tell them about me? Marissa smiled. If they're lucky. The flight was booked quietly. She didn't tell many people. Just Rhea. Just Linda. And Victor, of course, who arranged everything without question. When she landed at Schiphol, it felt surreal. Nothing had changed and everything had. The airport smelled the same, a strange mix of coffee, perfume, and recycled air. The signs were in Dutch and English. The announcements triggered something inside her, like muscle memory wrapped in emotion. She stood still for a long time, watching, listening, letting herself feel the weight of return. The summit was held in a historic government building near the canals. Marissa was greeted by an interpreter but politely declined. I remember how to speak, she said gently. The room was smaller than she expected, maybe 50 people, experts, policymakers, advocates. When she was introduced, the woman called her not just a guest, but an example of lived transformation. She stepped to the podium slowly. Her palms were sweaty, but her voice was steady. She spoke about fear, about silence, about the long, quiet process of becoming someone again. She told them about Leah, about the night she almost didn't answer the phone, and about the man who saw something in her when she had nothing left to show. She didn't cry, but many in the audience did. Afterwards, a woman approached her. Mid-60s, elegant scarf, grey streak in her hair. You won't remember me, she said in Dutch, voice soft. But I was your literature teacher in secondary school. I always wondered where you went. Marissa's breath caught. She didn't reply. The woman continued. You had a voice even back then. I'm glad the world gets to hear it now. That night, Marissa stood on a hotel balcony overlooking the canal. The water shimmered under the city lights. Bicycles passed below. Somewhere someone played violin. She thought of everything she had run from, everything she had buried, and how somehow it had all led back here, not to haunt her, but to hold her. Marissa returned to New York with a new stillness inside her. Not silence, stillness, the kind that comes after you face a storm and realize you're still standing. The trip had felt surreal, the applause, the faces, the memories folded into every corner of the city she thought she'd forgotten. But what surprised her most wasn't what she found in Amsterdam. It was what she didn't find. Shame. The weight she'd carried for years, of not being enough, of being a runaway, of losing her identity, had dissolved, not in a single moment. But piece by piece, every time someone looked at her and didn't see failure, they saw her. And when she stepped off the plane back at JFK, jet-lagged and unsure what day it was, there was no panic. No dread, only one thought. It's time to do more. Her first day back at the foundation was quiet. People greeted her with smiles, claps on the back, a few jokes about our international speaker. Victor simply handed her a coffee and nodded. No speeches, no banners, just glad you're home. Marissa sat at her desk, turned on her monitor, and opened a new folder titled Women Who Don't Know Their Leaders. Yet it wasn't part of her assignment. It wasn't even approved. But she had seen too many stories like hers go untold. Too many women stuck in survival mode, unaware they had something to teach, to give, just by being who they were. So she started a list. Names, stories, notes. It felt like planting seeds in a garden she finally believed might grow. That night, as she walked Leah home from school, her daughter chattered non-stop about a science project involving a plastic volcano and colored vinegar. Marissa laughed. "I hope it doesn't explode in our kitchen." "It might," Leah said proudly. They stopped for ice cream and walked slowly through the neighborhood, the sky golden with late sun. Marissa felt full. Not perfect, but full. Like something was finally settling into place. The next day everything changed. She was reviewing a case file at her desk when Rhea knocked softly and stepped in. "There's someone here asking for you," she said, voice lower than usual. "Okay," Marissa replied, not looking up. "A client?" "No." Marissa glanced at her. Rhea's face was unreadable. "He says he knows you from Utrecht." Time stopped. She stood slowly, walked to the reception area, and there, standing in the middle of the lobby, in a slate coat and polished shoes, was the last person she ever expected to see again. Lucas. She hadn't spoken his name in years, not out loud, not even in memory. He looked older, of course, but not by much. His face was leaner, his hair now touched with grey at the temples. But the eyes were exactly the same. Soft, complicated, searching. "Marissa," he said, voice low. Her knees nearly buckled. "What are you doing here?" she managed. He took a careful step forward. "I read about you, the speech, the foundation. I needed to see you." She swallowed hard. "You shouldn't be here." "I had to come." "No, you didn't." They sat in a side room, quiet and hidden. She couldn't look at him. He spoke first. "I didn't know what happened after you left. One day you were just gone." "I had to be," she said. "I know that now." Marissa clenched her hands. In her lap, he continued. "I've looked for you before, asked around, but it wasn't until your name started showing up online that I realized you'd started something. Something real." She said nothing. He shifted forward. "You're changing lives, Marissa. I'm rebuilding my own." He nodded slowly. "Is there room in that for me to apologize?" Marissa looked at him, finally. "You already are. They didn't talk about everything, not yet. The fights, the break. The choice she made to leave without saying goodbye, because saying goodbye meant explaining, and she had nothing left to explain with back then. But before he left, he asked a question. "Do you ever think about coming back?" She blinked. "To Utrecht?" "To anything and before," she exhaled. "No, because I'm not her anymore." He nodded. "But parts of her survived." She paused. "Yes, the best parts." That night, Marissa sat with Leah on the couch, reading her favorite picture book for the third time. "Mama?" "Yes." "Who was that man today?" Marissa smiled gently. "An old friend." "From the country we used to live in?" "Yes." "Did he make you happy or sad?" Marissa thought for a moment. "Both." Leah considered that. "Sometimes." "That's okay," she said, and leaned against her mother's shoulder. Marissa kissed the top of her head. "Yes," she whispered, "sometimes that's okay." In the days that followed, Marissa noticed something had shifted in her. She walked, taller, spoke louder, laughed more freely. She began mentoring 2 new hires at the foundation. Both women, both immigrants, both unsure of their place. She told them things no one had told her. You don't need permission to grow. You're not too late. Your story already matters. And one morning when Victor passed her in the hallway, he paused. "You've changed," he said. "No," Marissa replied. "I'm just finally visible." The email came on a Wednesday afternoon. Subject, proposal, expansion, Voss, initiative, Marissa. Stared at it for nearly 10 minutes before opening it. Inside, a brief outline, a suggestion, an opportunity. Develop a pilot program led by immigrant women for immigrant women, built around peer mentorship, self-advocacy, and micro-grants for independent ventures. Proposal to be submitted by Monsieur Voss. She blinked, not because she was surprised, but because she hadn't written it. At the bottom was a single sentence, "Thought you were ready." V. She printed the file and walked straight into Victor's office. He was already sipping tea as if he'd been expecting her. You want me to write this? She asked, holding up the file. I want you to lead it, he said. I've never done anything like this. You'd never spoken in public either, until you did. This is different. It's bigger, yes, and it's yours. She hesitated. What if I get it wrong? Victor leaned forward. Marissa, getting it wrong is how people who care learn to get it right. She spent the next 4 days drafting the proposal. Every line was like pulling thread from a tangled knot, not because she didn't know what to say, but because she felt too much. She'd lived every piece of the system she now hoped to change. She named the program The Bridge Project, a way to connect women who had walked through the fire with those still standing at the edge, unsure if they could cross, she envisioned. Spaces where no one was invisible, where language barriers didn't mean isolation, where survivors didn't just receive help, they gave it. She finished it at 3:17 a.m. on a Saturday, then hit send and exhaled. The following week brought a flood of new cases, one of them hit like a punch. Farah, the woman from Syria whose application Marissa had personally championed, but this time the file wasn't a request, it was a report. Eviction, emergency shelter, missing son. Marissa's chest tightened as she scanned the document. Her name was in it, the original referral, the initial approval. Somewhere in the bureaucracy, something had been lost, and someone had paid the price. She didn't wait. Didn't. Call a meeting. She grabbed her coat and walked 15 blocks through the city, fast, focused, heart-pounding. The shelter was a block of grey concrete with flickering lights and stale air. She walked past the reception desk and found Farah sitting on a worn sofa, back straight, eyes vacant. Her youngest, Zayn, was asleep beside her. Farah, Marissa said gently. At first there was no recognition. Then a flicker of something. You? Farah whispered. Marissa nodded, kneeling beside her. What happened? Farah held out a paper, crumpled, stained. They said the grant ran out. The caseworker changed. I didn't know who to call. Her voice cracked. I thought you would call. Marissa's throat burned. I should have. Farah shook her head. I don't blame you, but Samir's gone. I don't know where. Her words shattered something inside Marissa. Back at the office, she stormed into Ria's workspace. This shouldn't have happened, she said, louder than intended. I know, Ria replied. We approved her. She slipped through. She trusted us. Ria stood. We're doing what we can, but we can't save everyone. Marissa froze. The words echoed like a slap. That night she didn't go home. She walked, past restaurants filled with laughter, past windows glowing with soft light, past lives untouched by what she had just seen. She walked until her feet ached, until the city grew quiet, until the only sound left was the question pounding in her mind. What if helping isn't enough? When? She finally made it back. Linda had already put Leah to bed. There was a note on the counter. Everything's fine. Get some rest. But Marissa couldn't rest. She sat at the edge of Leah's bed and watched her sleep. Her daughter's face was calm, peaceful, untouched by the storm that had swept through the day. She thought of Samir, a child without a bed, a mother without certainty. She broke, not with sobs or sound, just a deep, silent ache that spilled from her eyes and soaked into her hands. She wept for every woman who fell through the cracks, for every form not filed, for every story never told. The morning she went to Victor. Not to resign, not to complain, but to ask for something bigger. We failed her, she said. Victor nodded. Yes, she needed more. I know. So what do we do now? He stood, walked to a cabinet, pulled out a folder. Inside, a list, names, addresses, notes. These are the ones we're losing, he said. You want to build something? Real? Start with them. That afternoon, Marissa called Farah. Not just to apologize, she said, to offer you something. Farah didn't speak. Marissa continued, I want you to join us. Help me find the ones like you. The ones still waiting. Farah's voice trembled. Why me? Because you know what it feels like. A pause, then, yes. They met that night in the office's basement conference room. Just the two of them. Flip charts, maps, coffee that had gone cold. They listed shelters, clinics, religious centers, legal aid groups. They drew arrows between pain and solutions. Marissa titled it on the whiteboard. Phase 1, Find the Forgotten, because they were everywhere. Women who didn't fit into the intake boxes. Women who weren't loud enough to be noticed. Women who stopped asking for help because help never came. And they deserved more than sympathy. They deserved systems. By Friday, the board had reviewed the bridge project, approved it, unanimously. Marissa stood at the front of the room and delivered the pitch herself. No paper, no notes, just truth. This is not charity, she said. It's infrastructure. It's survival turned into structure. It's the bridge between isolation and dignity. When she stepped out of the room, Leah ran up to her, backpack bouncing. Linda followed, grinning. So, Marissa smiled. Leah answered first. She built a bridge, she said. And this time Marissa didn't just smile. She believed it. It started with a radio interview. Then came a podcast episode titled The Voice That Changed the System. Then a feature in a major national newspaper. From Housekeeper to Architect of Hope, the woman behind the bridge project. Marissa hadn't expected any of it. She'd built the bridge project with her hands, her memory, her quiet fire. But she hadn't planned for it to become a movement. She hadn't expected headlines. She hadn't expected momentum. Foundations from other cities reached out. So did mayors, professors, non-profits. Everyone wanted to know how she did it, and suddenly everyone wanted her in the room. At first, she said yes to everything. Panels, webinars, site visits, interviews. She flew to Atlanta to advise a new housing initiative. She consulted on a legal aid toolkit for immigrant women in Portland. She helped design a grant system in Detroit. A university invited her to speak at their social justice symposium. A magazine listed her on a top 10 changemakers of the year list. Everywhere she went, people shook her hand like she was a miracle. But every night, she came home with a little less of herself. Her calendar became unrecognizable. Emails piled up, meetings blurred, case reviews went untouched. She was technically present. Her name still appeared on reports. Her image still opened every presentation. But something was dimming. The fierce clarity that had powered her was now stretched. Thin, worn at the edges. She didn't notice it at first, but others did. One Monday morning, Linda found her asleep at her desk, a granola bar half-eaten in one hand, a red pen dried out in the other, her phone buzzing silently on the table. "Girl," Linda whispered, "this ain't it." Marissa sat up with a jolt. "I'm fine." Linda crossed her arms. "You're sideways. I have a lot on my plate. There's always going to be a lot. But if the plate breaks, what good is it?" Later that afternoon, Farah pulled her aside in the hallway. "You haven't looked me in the tea." "Eyes in 3 days," she said. Marissa blinked. "I've just been busy." "You don't ask for help," Farah replied. "Not even now. I'm the one who's supposed to help." Farah didn't argue. She just said one sentence. "Even bridges need support beams," then walked away. That night, Marissa walked home slower than usual. Her bag felt heavier than ever. Her scarf itched, her shoes pinched. The city looked the same, but felt louder. She turned down an alley to avoid the noise and found herself walking past the diner she used to clean early in the mornings, before the foundation ever existed. The smell of coffee and burnt toast was still the same. She stopped outside the window and watched the waitress refill a cup, and she remembered what it felt like to serve without being seen. She wondered if, somewhere in the swirl of recognition and responsibility, she had started disappearing again, just in a new uniform. At home, Leah was asleep on the couch, shoes still on, backpack half open. Marissa took off her shoes, covered her with a blanket, and noticed the sketchbook peeking out. She opened it slowly. Inside, a crayon drawing of a tall bridge. At the top stood a small woman with dark hair. Underneath, dozens of small hands holding the base. In the corner, Leah had written in big block letters, "Mom's Bridge, built together." Marissa sat on the floor, back against the wall, and cried. It wasn't the kind of cry she had when things went wrong. It was the kind that came after holding too much for too long. Silent, hot, cleansing. The next morning she called Victor. "I can't keep doing it like this," she said, voice thin. "No," he replied, "I don't want to stop, but I feel like I'm unraveling." "You don't have to stop," Victor said gently. "You just need to stop doing it alone. I've always worked alone. Then maybe now is the time to grow differently." She paused. "I don't. So I know how to ask. You just did." That Friday, Marissa called a staff meeting. Everyone came: Ria, Linda, Farah, the volunteers, the outreach team, even 2 of the new program fellows. She stood at the front of the room, hands not shaking, just open. "I built the bridge project because I knew what it felt like to be invisible," she began. "And I thought, maybe I had to carry that invisibility in secret even as I tried to dismantle it." She took a breath. "But I forgot something." She looked around. "This work doesn't exist because I'm strong. It exists because all of us are. And I need your help. I need to share this weight, or it will bury me." Silence. Then Farah stood. "We've been waiting for you to say that." Then Linda. "You carried us. Let us carry you." Then Ria. "I've already drawn up the leadership matrix. It's color-coded." Laughter broke the tension. The air in. The room shifted, from tight to expansive. They worked for hours that day, delegating, designing sub-leadership pods, pairing mentors and mentees. No longer Marissa at the center, but Marissa in the circle, equal, supported, human. In the weeks that followed, she took 2 full days off for the first time in over a year. She and Leah spent a whole afternoon in the library. They made pancakes in the shape of animals. She turned off her phone and something extraordinary happened. The foundation didn't collapse. The work continued, and she felt herself returning to herself. The bridge project expanded into 3 more cities, each one led by women who had once been the ones filling out forms, standing in lines waiting for their names to be called. Now they called the meetings. Now they ran the programs. Marissa watched from the sidelines with pride, not possessiveness, because real leadership, she realized, wasn't building something that couldn't run without you. It was building something that could outgrow you and still carry your fingerprints. One quiet evening, she sat with Leah near the river. They shared a small bench, wrapped in a borrowed blanket. The air was crisp, the sky a pale gray. "Mama," Leah asked, "do bridges ever get tired?" Marissa smiled. "Yes, sometimes they do." "What happens then?" "They lean on the banks," she said, "and let others walk across." Leah thought about it, then leaned her head on her mother's shoulder, like a quiet answer. Spring arrived slowly that year, not with a sudden bloom or a burst of warmth, but with quiet signs. A breeze that no longer stung, a ray of sunlight that lingered a bit longer through the office window, the return of birds singing outside the foundation's glass walls. Marissa stood by the window, watching a group of new interns arrive for orientation. Young women, some nervous, others bold, all of them carrying stories she would never fully know, and that was okay. They didn't need to be saved. They needed space. She sipped her tea, now habitually cold, and smiled softly. A year had passed since the launch of the bridge project. There were now 5 cities involved, 36 women in full-time leadership, more than 1,000 families impacted. Marissa no longer reviewed every file, no longer attended every launch, no longer needed to. She had become something else, not the center, not the symbol, but the root. One of her proudest moments came quietly during a video call with a new regional director in Milwaukee, a woman named Naima. Naima had once stood on the other side of a help desk with 2 bags and no papers. Now she spoke with confidence, clarity, and her own team behind her. As the call ended, Naima said, "I hope I make you proud." Marissa replied, "You already have, but that's not why you're here." Naima smiled. "Then why?" "Because this doesn't stop with me. It grows through you." Marissa had begun writing again. Not grants, not speeches. Letters to herself. To the woman she was at the airport with a toddler and no plan. To the housekeeper who answered a phone she wasn't supposed to touch. To the girl in Utrecht who had stopped speaking Dutch so she wouldn't have to explain her absence. She didn't plan to publish them, but maybe Leah would read them one day and understand that growth doesn't always look like strength. Sometimes it looks like surrender. Sometimes it looks like starting again. In the hallway, outside her office, the foundation had installed a mural, not her idea. She'd resisted at first, but eventually she let them. It wasn't her portrait, thank God. It was an abstract image, a wooden bridge stretching across a wide river. On one end, a shadowed figure walking forward. On the other, dozens of hands holding the beams, and a child, mid-step, crossing with ease. At the bottom, in small gold letters, "Build what carries others." Marissa passed it every day. Some days, she didn't even notice it anymore. Other days, it made her stop, breathe and remember. One Saturday morning, she and Leah visited the community center in their neighborhood. Leah had joined a youth storytelling group, 10 kids, a circle of folding chairs and notebooks full of imagination. When the teacher asked them to write about someone they admired, Leah didn't hesitate. She drew a small figure with a long scarf and tired eyes. Then she wrote, "My mom builds things you can't see, but if she stopped, people would fall." Marissa blinked back tears as she read it, not because it was grand, but because it was true. Later that night, as they sat on the couch, Leah leaned against her. "Mama," she said, "do you think people are born brave, or do they become brave?" Marissa thought about that. "I think we become brave when we have no other choice, and even braver when we do have a choice and still say yes." Leah was quiet for a while, then, "I want to build something one day too." "You will," Marissa said, "and you won't need to do it alone." The final time Marissa spoke, at a public event, it wasn't about the foundation. It wasn't about numbers or outcomes, it was about listening. She stood in front of a modest room in a small town outside of Philadelphia. No stage. No lights, no cameras, just chairs and people and silence. She began, "There was a time when my story was something I hid. Then there was a time when I used it to prove I belonged. But now I think our stories aren't meant to defend us or define us. They're meant to connect us." She paused. "I used to think I was building a bridge for others, but the truth is, they were building one for me too." She never gave another speech after that. Not because she didn't have anything left to say, but because she finally understood. She didn't have to speak to matter. She just had to remain steady, so that others could cross. And if this story stayed with you, if it reminded you of someone you know or of something you're quietly building, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Leave your like, share it with someone who needs to hear it today, and tell us in the comments, what are you building that no one sees, but that matters anyway? Because stories like this aren't just stories. They're mirrors. They're reminders. That hope begins in the smallest choices, and you, at Yes You, might be someone else's bridge.